We need diversity on race and gender because it brings to the bench all the experiences of the citizens to whom they serve. There's many ways to measure the many effects that state judges have on our lives and why we should care. The first is the direct effect. If I get a traffic ticket and I want to challenge it, if my landlord, I feel, unfairly evicts me from my home, if I have an employee that I want to fire who makes complaints against me, I'm going to go to state court. If I have a dispute about my property, I'm going to go to state court. And that state court judge has tremendous discretion in resolving the case. There is limited oversight of the work of state judges. It's not highly visible. Courts of appeals hear very few cases. So that state judge not only is the most significant person resolving your dispute, they are going to be the only person resolving your dispute. They are the last word in most cases. Arguably, the indirect consequences are even more significant. So when a state judge decides one case, not only does that resolve the dispute with respect to the people before the judge, but it affects disputes or potential disputes any way related to that case. So let's take an example. Recently, a Stanford swimmer was convicted of sexual assault. In that case, the state judge, who was also a Stanford graduate, had also been an athlete at Stanford, decided that the student should not receive the standard 2-year penalty set forth by the state legislature in California as the minimum sentence for that crime. Instead, he decided to give him a lighter sentence, no prison time, 6 months in jail. Given how crowded California jails are, he knew that meant 3 months in jail. That lighter sentence was justified on the ground that the defendant, who has been convicted of sexual assault, has a promising future and has never before committed a crime. Not only did that decide that dispute, affecting the defendant, the victim, their families, their friends, it also means that anytime someone is accused of sexual assault who's a student, a college student, especially at a college like Stanford University, they don't merit the default sentence because everyone who gets admitted to a college is a promising person, has no criminal record. So that one case has implication for sexual assault claims on every college campus in that court's jurisdiction. State judges are public officials, very powerful public officials. We have the right as citizens to know who they are. I thought this would be quite easy to discover. To my great surprise and disappointment, I learned that very few states provide biographical information about the judges who serve on their courts. That when commentators make observations about who they believe serve on state courts, they're actually not based on any reliable empirical evidence. So my colleague Albert Yoon and I, with whom I've done a lot of work on labor economics and work on the judiciary, decided it was time to find out who serves on state courts. So we set about collecting biographical information about every state judge in every jurisdiction, all 51, the 50 states plus the District of Columbia. We did this by looking only at credible sources, beginning with the limited information states provide, and then compiled something we're calling the State Bench Database. The State Bench Database includes a list of all judges, and it provides the biographical information of greatest interest, which is how many judges, how many men, how many women, how do those numbers compare to the numbers in the state? Likewise, how many people of color, how many white non-Hispanic people serve as judges, and that is where the basis for the results that we report. We found that almost all state judges in the United States are white men, white non-Hispanic men. This was a surprising finding for several reasons. Looking first at sex. What's surprising about the finding on sex is that women have made up substantial numbers of law students for 40 years. Indeed, for the last 20 years, they've been more than half or near half of the students in law schools. So it's not that we're not producing enough women lawyers. We teach them in law school that judges are, in the United States, have a tremendous control over the development of the law. They make law. I think the public doesn't necessarily appreciate how much power judges have over the development of law in the US. And to discover that those judges are almost entirely white men, not because they aren't necessarily good, but because the lack of diversity creates doubt about whether the selection method is actually one about picking the best judges.